What would happen if an operating system was designed from the ground up for the future, without any legacy code? That's exactly the question that led Jean-Louis Gassée, former head of product development and marketing at Apple Computer, to leave his high-level position and found a new hardware and software company, Be Incorporated. However, you hardly hear of Be or their flagship product BeOS these days. Why is that? I'm Distro39B, and this is the story of BeOS.
Times through tangled threads and corporate crimes, you may never find love down a T1 line.
After working at Apple Computer for 9 years, French executive Jean-Louis Gassée resigned from his high-level job on March 2, 1990. Shortly after, Gassée and Steve Sackerman, another ex-Apple employee, founded Be Inc. with the goal of creating a brand new software and hardware platform from scratch without all the legacy cruft common among the operating systems of the time. When Be Inc. was just getting started, Sackerman read through the dictionary to figure out a name to replace Gassée's idea of United Technoids Inc. No, I am not joking. When Sackerman told Gassée that he got tired and stopped at Be, Gassée responded with, "Be is nice, end of story." And so it was. Originally, Be wanted to be a hardware company and buy an operating system instead of developing one in-house. However, after negotiations fell flat with an operating system called Chorus OS, they decided to develop an in-house kernel and operating system for the AT&T Hobbit architecture. Development continued, with an alpha in-house kernel being completed in 1992 and a graphical interface beginning development in 1993. However, in 1994, tragedy struck. AT&T discontinued the Hobbit processor due to lack of interest. Quickly, Be scrambled to choose a new CPU architecture, and they chose the PowerPC CPU that Apple started using a few years earlier. Thankfully, a new compiler meant that nearly the entirety of user space could be left unmodified, and talented software engineers Bob Harold and Cyril Marilyn ported the kernel to their new PowerPC prototype hardware designed by Joe Palmer. This eventually became the Be-box, which we'll cover more in the next section. While development of BeOS and the Be-box was going well, Be had run into a problem. Quite simply, they had no money left. In order to secure investors, they decided to go public with their project through an unveiling at Agenda 95, which seems to have been some sort of tech show. Despite a rocky setup, the show was a great success, with investors and developers alike lining up to give the company the money they desperately needed. But what about BeOS wowed audiences so much that the company went from near bankruptcy to having top-tier venture capitalist investors lined up? Let's talk about it. While BeOS was written from the ground up, inspiration for its technical design was taken from macOS, Windows, Unix, and Amiga OS. The operating system was designed for audio and video tasks, which at the time were in their infancy, and the small existing market was dominated by Unix workstations costing upwards of $10,000 US. BeOS took some technical inspiration from those machines' operating systems, with a mostly POSIX-compliant command line interface, Unix-like device management, and a robust Unix-inspired file system known as BFS. BFS is a journaling file system, meaning that if the system is improperly shut down, the risk of corruption is very low, and a full disk check is rarely necessary. Like most Unix systems, BFS is case sensitive and supports every Unicode symbol besides the /. It supports very large files and disks, Unix-style attributes, and built-in automatic indexing as well. BeOS was also very fast, with boot times being as low as 10 seconds even on hardware of the time, and this was at least partially due to BFS's optimizations. There's even a whole book about it. Take that, Microsoft. Does your file system have a book written about it? Oh. Never mind that. Another very important design choice that aided in making BeOS a robust multimedia operating system was the inclusion of support for multiple processors, a fully multi-threaded design from the kernel up, and preemptive multitasking. This further increased the speed of the operating system, especially on computers with more than one CPU, and can vastly increase stability since if one application crashed, the rest of the system would almost always be able to continue running without any issues whatsoever, except in the case of severe system or driver-related bugs. The BeOS desktop also took inspiration from all of these operating systems. An example of this is the Dusk Bar, which is essentially a cross between the macOS menu bar and the Windows taskbar. The Dusk Bar contains the Be menu, which is similar to the Start menu of the time, a clock, a system tray, and an application switcher. The Dusk Bar can be moved to any corner of the screen, squashed into a smaller size, or expanded into a panel on the top or bottom of the desktop. Most application windows have tab title bars that you can move to different sides of the window with a shift key. This is definitely an interesting way to do window management that we really haven't seen in many other operating systems. I think a fully tab-based window manager would be pretty cool, at least in theory. BeOS also supports up to 32 virtual workspaces, a feature originating on Unix that wasn't added to macOS until 2007 and Windows until 2015. In terms of preloaded applications, BeOS has the usual desktop programs like a file manager, web browser, and media player. But it also has some less common ones, like an audio multi-tracking program called 3D Mix, a web server called Poor Man's Web Server, and a mostly POSIX-compliant terminal. Several demos are included to show off the capabilities of BeOS, such as this spinning teapot. Thanks to the intelligent multi-threading of BeOS, all of these programs and more could be run at the same time without too much of a slowdown, even on hardware of the time. Audio and video could also be synced up in real time without slowdown, even on dual 66 MHz PowerPC CPUs. Which is a testament to the operating system's optimization. The first hardware to run BeOS was the B-Box, designed to be developers' first introduction to the operating system and APIs. It was not designed to be the platform for the masses yet, with Jean-Louis Gassée himself stating that, before we let you use the B-Box, we believe you must have some aptitude toward programming. The standard language is C++. The B-Box originally shipped with dual PowerPC 603 CPUs running at a grand 66 MHz, up to 256 megabytes of RAM, and a hard drive. I wasn't able to find any data related to disk capacities, but I'd imagine the drive was anywhere from 500 megabytes to 4 gigabytes in size. Unlike nearly everything else B did, the B-Box was built using mostly off-the-shelf parts, and was one of the only machines to use the PowerPC reference platform standard for its firmware. However, there were still several custom hardware components, such as the CPU monitor lights on the front, nicknamed the Blinken lights, and a 37-pin electronics experimentation port known as the Geek port, which is similar in concept to the GPIO pins on the Raspberry Pi. The B-Box went on sale for $2,500 at the end of 1995. Over 1,000 developers signed up to get the B-Box, but only 100 were available, and most developers did not receive their B-Box until 1996 due to B running out of money again. An upgraded B-Box with 133 MHz processors was released later that year, and there seemed to be some deals with a Japanese company to sell the B-Box in Japan. However, before that happened, on January 30th, 1997, the B-Box was discontinued. Less than 2,000 B-Boxes were sold before the discontinuation, and B shifted focus to the development of their operating system only. Shortly before the discontinuation of the B-Box, however, BeOS was ported to PowerPC Macintosh computers, and a few Macintosh clone manufacturers like Power Computing sold machines with BeOS installed alongside macOS in a dual boot configuration. Speaking of Macintosh, in the late 90s, Apple Computer really wasn't doing too well. Specifically, the macOS software hadn't had a major update since 1991, and was really showing its age with its lack of preemptive multitasking, meaning that if an application crashed, it would bring the entire system down. With the catastrophic failure of the Calogen and Copeland projects, the two in-house attempts at modernizing the macOS, Apple started looking to acquire an operating system for their computers. Solaris, Next Step, Windows NT, yes, really, and BeOS were considered, and Jean-Louis Gassée and Steve Sackerman gave then Apple CEO Gil Amelio a demo of their operating system. While Amelio was impressed by the BeOS, Apple did not end up buying B, instead buying Next Computer for $427 million at the beginning of 1997. There were several major factors involved in Apple not buying B. For one, BeOS wasn't finished and was missing some core features such as language translations and printer support. Some also considered the multi-threading method that BeOS used to be slower and inferior to competing methods when dealing with large applications. They couldn't come to an agreement on pricing either, with B wanting no less than $200 million and Apple not offering more than $125 million. And I'm sure that a direct call from then Next CEO Steve Jobs, ever heard of him, to Gil Amelio allegedly warning him not to buy B couldn't have been too great for the deal either. Next Step became Apple's Next Step. God damn it, I went through this entire video without making a single B pun and broke my streak with a next pun, and to this day, macOS has its roots in the Next Step operating system. Despite Apple not buying it, BeOS wasn't dead. Not just yet. After all, they still had their deal with Power Computing. Oh wait, Macintosh clones aren't allowed anymore, never mind that. Unless you want to get sued. Soon, it no longer ran on the Macs at all because of the New World firmware that it was never ported to. However, there was still one final hope for BeOS. With the death of the Macintosh clone business, and the introduction of the New World firmware on the iMac, BeOS's PowerPC days were over. However, B wasn't dead just yet. In 1997 and 98, BeOS was quickly ported to the Intel Pentium CPU. The first Intel-supported and the first non-preview release of BeOS, BeOS R3, was released in March of 1998. Updates continued to be released over the next 2 years, and BeOS gained somewhat of a cult following, but it never made it beyond that stage. Be also released a stripped-down free version of BeOS 5 called BeOS 5 Personal Edition in March of 2000, along with a brief and unsuccessful stint in the internet appliance market, with the Sony eVilla, a product that made it onto Time magazine's list of the shortest-lived tech products ever, barely lasting longer than this sentence, and that was basically the end for Be. On November 13th, 2001, Be Incorporated was acquired by Palm for just $11 million US, and the company was dissolved soon after. Following this acquisition, Be, now under Palm, filed a lawsuit against Microsoft alleging that they used monopolistic practices to dissuade manufacturers from bundling non-Windows operating systems like BeOS with PCs installed in a dual-boot configuration with Windows. Be alleged that Microsoft, quote, threatened to raise the price of Windows to Hitachi if Hitachi installed Be's boot manager on its machines. In September of 2003, Microsoft and Be reached a settlement where Microsoft paid Be, now under Palm, $23.3 million US. While there were plans for a version of Palm OS to be based on BeOS technologies, this operating system was never actually sold on any devices. The BeOS intellectual property is currently owned by Access Co., a Japanese technology company, but they haven't done anything with it in years. Shortly after Be sold to Palm, a beta version of BeOS was leaked. This version is codenamed Dano and reveals some future plans for the operating system. These include not yet working 3D accelerated graphics support, USB mass storage support, Wi-Fi support, printer support, and improved network API known as Bone. If Dano had been released before Be went defunct, maybe BeOS wouldn't have completely died, but we'll never know for sure. Between the death of BeOS and today, several attempts have been made at continuing or recreating BeOS. The codebase of BeOS was, very possibly illegally, used to create the proprietary Zeta operating system, which was sold from 2004 until Access Co. complained in 2007. Several reverse-engineered recreations of BeOS have also existed, which are perfectly legal, including several Linux-based operating systems that were abandoned long ago. However, by far the most popular and well-known recreation of BeOS is HaikuOS. Originally known as OpenBeOS, development of Haiku began in 2002, and as of the time of this video, the latest release is the 4th beta of R1. HaikuOS is an open source operating system written from scratch that is source and binary compatible with BeOS. Development remains active, with about 1 beta a year, and HaikuOS can be installed on modern hardware with generally pretty good hardware compatibility minus GPU support. Thanks to ports of many popular open source applications and libraries, HaikuOS is a perfectly usable desktop operating system. BeOS, Zeta, and Haiku have also found a home on a handful of audio and video appliances. Roland, for example, used BeOS for their Edirol DV7 editing appliance, and the company TuneTracker's radio broadcast automation software has run on BeOS, Zeta, and HaikuOS through the years. There's a chance that the radio station that you listen to on your way to work might be running on HaikuOS, and I don't know about you, but personally, I think that's pretty cool. With all of its features, it's not hard to wonder why BeOS was ultimately a commercial failure. As usual, the answer to that question is complicated. However, in my opinion, the primary cause of Be's problem is the fact that they entered the market too late. By that point, there was already Windows and Mac OS, and the only other operating system that has succeeded in the PC market even a little bit, Linux, is given away for free and modifiable by anyone. Be's only hope at general relevance passed in 1996 when Apple didn't acquire them, and unless Apple had gone out of business in the late 90s, it's unlikely Be would have succeeded at all. However, despite the ultimate commercial failure of BeOS, it's a very interesting footnote in technological history, and its story deserves to be told, along with several others like NextStep and Amiga OS. BeOS and HaikuOS are some of my favorite operating systems of all time, and I'm sad that more people don't know about them. If you enjoyed this look back at one of the most interesting operating systems of all time, consider giving this video a like and subscribing to my channel. Thank you so much for over 1,000 subscribers. The support it's received recently is absolutely amazing. With that being said, see you in October of 2027, where I cover the rise and fall of the human race.